Hi, welcome everyone to Talk Back. It's December 9th, 2024, and I'm here with two more very interesting people in our community to help talk about a very interesting and important topic. You know, I'm going to introduce it like this. So many, many years ago, when I started out as a lawyer in southeastern Connecticut, we were just starting to get a handle on the issue of domestic violence. It was exploding all around us, and we really didn't know how to handle it. Police didn't know how to handle it, the medical community, the psychological community, the community of helpers. And it took a while for us to get the legal system, the criminal justice system educated, and we started making progress. So Safe Futures started out as an organization called the Southeastern Connecticut Women's Organization, and we changed the name to Safe Futures years later to let people know that we handle families, men, women, children, as well as just women in the title. And so over the years, Safe Futures has had many initiatives going into the schools, teaching kids about healthy relationships, making sure there are shelters and making sure there are halfway houses for people going through domestic violence issues. And so all the time we're keeping to make progress. Now we're going to have a brand new family justice system, the Center for Safe Futures, that's being built now in Waterford that will coordinate so many of the organizations and agencies that impinge upon you if you're involved in a domestic violence episode. I'm also on the committee now for elder abuse. We're learning how important it is to protect our senior community, that community is exploding with scams that are the victims of, by abuse by members of their family, their loved ones that they trust, by their financial advisors, by everyone in the community trying to take advantage. So we keep improving. Safe Futures keeps moving on with different programs to help all aspects of our population. And now, in the last few years, I've been very proud to be part of the Camp Hope program, which is we're going to learn about today because we have the two people from Safe Futures who are the directors of the program who run it. And what is it? We're going to get more into it, but I'll just say it's a wonderful camping experience, a week-long camping experience for kids that have been impacted by domestic violence and abuse, whether they themselves were victimized or they are witness to it, because we know that being a witness can be just as traumatic and damaging to your future as being an actual victim yourself. So, that introduction, let me introduce Mariah Murdoch. Hi, Mariah.
Hi, Sheila.
Okay. And Megan Foley.
Hello.
Two people who work for Safe Futures and specifically on the Camp Hope project, which we're going to talk more about today. So first, let me turn to you, Mariah. You're the director of the Camp Hope program now. Mm-hmm. Tell us something about your background, where you come from, what you got educated in, what your interests were, how you wound up at Safe Futures.
Yeah, so I'm from Connecticut, not too far away from Safe Futures offices. Along the journey, I always stayed outside. And so I love the outdoors. And then I moved to North Carolina. And at some point within the journey, I decided to study social work. And when I was studying social work, the outdoors was still so important to me. And so I studied social work and outdoor leadership. And then from there, I just got involved in jobs that allowed me to do both. And so I started my career in North Carolina working within boarding schools and therapeutic programs that allowed for a lot of space outside, but also doing the social emotional work. And then when I relocated back to Connecticut, Safe Futures just popped up as this job that was Camp Hope and Pathways, and it was really intriguing. And I did not know anything about Camp Hope before then, and so I just looked it up, and it was both of my worlds combining perfectly, and so that's kind of how I got into the job.
So, and now your title actually is director of the program, right?
Yeah, Camp Hope and Pathways coordinator.
Right.
Yeah, and I
right. And we'll talk
program.
about how the program just started around during COVID time.
Yeah.
You weren't around then. You
No.
came a little bit later, and we had Chris was the what was the last? Chris Foster.
Yeah, Chris
was
Foster.
the first director. It was tough working because it was COVID, and the very first year was not in camp
No.
in person. It was online. It was
Yeah.
a virtual thing that it just got it, but it got going, and now we'll talk about what's happened since. So let me turn now to Megan Foley. Megan, give us your background, your interest, how you came to Safe Futures.
Yeah, so I'm from the area. I grew up right in Waterford, and kind of grew up being involved at Safe Futures, actually, volunteering and stuff. My mom has always kind of been involved, and so she got our family into it. And so it's been an organization that's been near and dear to my heart my whole life. And then through college, I studied political science and psychology, and learning more about the legal system and psychology and the impacts of trauma and things like that. It kind of became more and more something that I was passionate about. And when looking for kind of what to do next after I graduated, I saw that they were looking for educators, and I was really excited about the opportunity not only to get to work at Safe Futures, but to kind of get to be involved in the community that I've lived in my whole life, and getting to go to schools and talk to kids. And a main part of my job also is I'm the pet advocate educator. So a lot of what I'm talking about too is the resources and access we have for support for pets too, and kind of allowing the family units to stay together. And as a avid dog lover, that is definitely huge for me.
That's so interesting. The government in Connecticut included pets in the circle of protection in restraining orders or keeping people safe, which was very interesting because often, as you probably know, the pet was used as a weapon. I'll take your pet, or I'll harm your pet, and many pets got caught in the crossfire. So that's a very interesting and important part of your work. And how did you move over to the Camp Hope side of things?
So being a prevention educator, working in the schools a lot, it is kind of, they go hand in hand in working with kids in schools and then being able to work directly with the kids in our programs. It's a good overlap because it is a lot of the same kids that we're seeing in schools that we're working with, because that's really the point of it, is that they're just kids, and these are kids in the community that we're working with and kind of creating the space for.
So in the work that you've been doing the last few years, both of you, will start with you, Mariah. I'm sure you've seen kids who are traumatized by things that have happened through their homes or other settings, most often in their families, through parental abuse or boyfriend-girlfriend abuse or things like that. And you've both seen that. Do you think it's just an overwhelming problem that involves so many more kids than we even realize? Talk about that.
Yeah, it is an overwhelming problem that does involve a lot of kids, and a lot of kids who get missed. And I think that the schools do their best to try to catch which kiddos are really being impacted by various traumas and violence, since teachers and administration sees them, 5 times a week. But kids still get missed, and so there's so many kids being impacted, and some kids just think it's their normal, so they don't even recognize that it's abuse and violence, and it's not healthy. And so
you too, Meg. So do you think that you go into the schools, do you think that the schools have the personnel, teachers or the administrators, who are able to sense which kids need help? Do you think they need more work on that? What's your feeling about that?
I mean, I think there's always more to be done, absolutely, but I mean, I think also they are doing what they can, in the time that they have, the resources that they have, and with what they know. A lot of it is training and experience, and it's a lot of things that you don't even really know to ask or know to look for, or you might be seeing it and not realizing what you're seeing. And so I think just being open to kind of having the conversations and the schools that are so eager and awesome about bringing us in and kind of starting those conversations, I think they're definitely creating this space for that to happen. And I think that's kind of the only way, because no one just knows what to do. No one always gets it right. But it's about just being willing to kind of have the conversations and acknowledge maybe what we don't know and what we need help with.
Do you think that the teachers in the schools need more training? And I know they're not there. They're there to educate and to teach arithmetic and English and all the substantive subjects. But do you think they also need to have some training to pick up certain problems in the kids?
Yeah, I mean, that type of training is absolutely important. I think it's pretty necessary for them to have, but I also don't want them to feel, like you said, their job really is to educate and create that space for everyone. And so you don't want them to feel the added pressure of, I need to figure out what's going on. And so I think training is necessary and important, but also kind of acknowledging that no one's going to be able to do it on their own, and no one's going to be able to help everyone on their own. And so being willing and able to talk to people about what's going on and what you're needing, I think is the really important part.
Yeah. So a big issue here is how you find the kids for these programs. Where do they come from? How do you find them? But we're going to talk about that after we see a film, because now I think is a good time to introduce the fact that Camp Hope America, which is the big umbrella organization, started some years ago by Casey Gwynn from California, who had a lot of foresight to develop this. And there's a very short video that we're going to show now that will give a nice introduction. And then when we come back, we'll talk about how it works in our community, okay? All right, can we show the film? Here we go.
Hi, I'm Casey Gwynn, the founder of Camp Hope America. For the next few minutes, we want to tell you the story of Camp Hope. Camp Hope is the first camp in the United States focused on children impacted by child abuse and domestic violence. Our goal at Camp Hope is not just to give children their childhood back, but it's to give them a pathway to hope. Because trauma-exposed children so often end up in the state prisons of this country as they grow up. And so often they repeat the generational cycle down through the years. Camp Hope's goal is to break that cycle and to give children a pathway to hope.
Just because knowing that you're around other people that care about you is the best feeling in the world.
I can taste this, the fear that love alone erases. So I'm back to the basics. I figure it's time I face this. Time to take my own advice. Love alone is worth the fight. Love alone is worth the fight. And I never thought I'd come to this, but it seems like I'm finally feeling numb to this. The funny thing about a name is you forget what the reason you were playing the game is. And it's all an illusion, a 21st century institution. And so I'm headed down the open road unknown. And we find what we're made of through the open door. Is it fear you're afraid of? What are you waiting for? Love alone is worth the fight. Love alone is worth the fight. We're only here for a season. I'm looking for the rhyme and reason. Why you born, why you leaving? What you fearing, what you believing? Why you living and breathing? Why you fighting it and getting it even? Let's go headed down the open road unknown. And we find what we're made of through the open door. Is it fear you're afraid of? What are you waiting
Hope is something you can hold on to when you're feeling down or sad. It's never going to leave you. It's always right there next to you.
Kids who have experienced healing go out and heal other people, and that's why this matters. It matters a lot.
We need you to help us change the ending for these children. You can love these kids at 10 or 12 or 14, or you can lock them up at 17 or 18 and say you're tough on crime. Will you invest in hope? Will you help break the generational cycle of abuse? We need you to be hope givers.
All right. Well, that was a good introduction. It was, and we saw at the end how many groups there are all over the country that are forming with Camp Hope.
And there's a lot more now.
And a lot more now. And we saw that it said Camp Hope Connecticut. So now we have Camp Hope Safe Futures, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about. I mean, he talked about the ACE score, the Hope score. Basically, what he's saying is that we're not just inviting kids to have a nice time. We've thought this through. There's a science behind this. There's actually a science about hope. There's a science about adverse childhood experiences, ACE, and we're using all of that to help these kids during that 1 week at camp, and also during the year. We're going to talk about that. So, Mariah, talk about that. What is the ACE score? What is that all about?
Yes, the ACE score is a tool that we use to measure how many adverse experiences a kid has. And so the kids within our program, like the video said, they're averaging about like an ACE score of 6, which means that you've had at least six adverse childhood experiences.
So what are some of those experiences?
Yeah, some of those experiences are your parents are divorced, you have one parent in jail, you witnessed domestic violence, you don't feel loved and cared for, you were unsure where your next meal was coming from, and then so a lot of the categories for it is household function, your emotions, and just safety, and then some of your parents or whoever's in the household.
And how do we arrive at this? We give them a verbal test, a written exam? How does it work?
Yeah, it's 10 questions, and it is a written just questionnaire that kids can do by themselves, or they can do it with an adult help. And so they go through the 10 questions, and it's just yes or no, and then we leave it at that.
So 6 is like the scary number to reach. If you've got 6, what if you have 5 or 4? Or that?
Yeah, so any adverse experience has an impact. And each kid will be impacted differently. But we know when the adverse experiences are just snowballing, the effect and impact that it will have on your life long term just increases. And so 5 is scary, 1 is scary, 6 is scary. All of it deeply impacts an individual.
What's the highest number on the scale?
10.
10.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so our goal, like ACEs, are scary things, and they're a reality for a lot of the kids, all of the kids that we serve. But then there's positive childhood experiences that with Camp Hope that we're creating, and positive childhood experiences
Can balance off.
Reduce the impact of ACEs. And a lot of the basis for positive childhood experiences is built around safety, having adults who are trustworthy, who you can talk to, having space to feel your emotions and process them, and then just being able to show up to a space and be yourself.
So he's implying that Casey, who established this idea, is implying that if you don't do anything about these high scores, these kids will wind up either in jail or in unsatisfying lives, unable to have healthy relationships, becoming, God forbid, criminals themselves, abusers and things like, I mean, and this is scientific. This is based on what we know of statistics that we know about this, right? It's not just
it's
talk.
true. Yeah, it's not just talk at all. Because with higher ACE scores come like increased like depression, anxiety, shorter lifespans, even with breathing. Like it affects your breathing and your gut health and your overall experiences in life.
Okay, so now we have the ACE scores. So we find the kids in this situation where they have a bunch of ACEs, let's say. So Megan, how do we move from there to the concept that hope is not just a word or a thought, a hope, it's a science. It really can move people to help them erase or overcome these ACE scores. What does that all mean?
Yeah, so the kind of definition of hope that we use is believing in yourself, believing in others, and believing in your dreams. And so when we're looking at that, there's kind of the two parts of it. So hope is goal setting. Can you think of a goal that you want to reach and tell yourself that's a possibility for me? And the other part of that is agency. So are you able to like really persist in trying to reach that goal? Or how do setbacks maybe affect you? When you're looking at kids with higher ACE scores, this can impact hope, right? So maybe lower hope. So this makes it harder to have goals. It makes it harder to think, oh wait, I can reach for that. I can try and achieve that. And then also it affects their agency. So when they hit a roadblock or when they hit kind of a challenge and they have to figure out how am I going to overcome this, are they able to overcome that? Are they able to see the hope? Are they able to see that, okay, I can figure out a way to still reach my goal? And really that's what we are trying to build. We're trying to give them the confidence to know that they can set goals for themselves and they can set high goals for themselves, and giving them the space and also the confidence to try for those goals and not be afraid to hit roadblocks and not be afraid to not have a totally smooth road and know that they still have the opportunities ahead of them.
Yeah. But when you find these kids in the community to take part in the program, they may be still mired in these adverse experiences at home. How do you manage that? And well, let's just talk about that. How do you find these kids? What age levels are they at for this program? How do you find them and get them to encourage them to be part of this experience?
Yeah, Camp Hope is for ages 7 through 17, and we find kids who are eligible for the program through community partners, and so the schools are a big help. DCF, Department of Child Services, is a big help. Safe Futures, like anybody who walks through the door and has kids who are those ages, like our adult advocates will refer kids to camp. And so a lot of different individuals and agencies know about camp, and they just send people our way.
Okay. And do you get, once you learn about them, they're referred, how do you get the family involved into the process, Megan? How do you get the family to help sign up or make sure the kids are going to get there when, as I'm thinking, some of them may still be mired in the problems at home?
Yeah, absolutely. We do help with, we provide transportation, so if they need lifts or help getting to programs and to camp, we definitely make sure that that's not a barrier. And yeah, we help in kind of whatever ways they need. So if they need to sit down with someone and help them fill out the forms and the paperwork, we can do that. We can also just kind of give them to do on their own time if they don't have the flexible schedule to come in and sit with us. We try and really meet people where they're at, because we do know that all of these families are in totally different scenarios and situations. So really, whatever kind of support they need in getting the kids enrolled, we definitely want to make sure that there are no extra barriers in the way of the kids having access to the programs.
We do a lot of phone calls too, just to like build relationship of like, hey, this is who we are. We would love to have you join us, and just creating that relationship so that parents are feeling safe and then the kids are also feeling safe. Because we do a lot of fun, but also like risky activities.
Right.
Like
So you have to
climbing.
establish relationships with the parents too. How does that work? How do you do that, Megan?
I would say Mariah has a better grasp on
Okay.
the parent relationships.
Yeah, and so we do a lot of like sit-down conversations and phone calls, and then we also have so many family programs where we will invite new families to join us, and then during that time, like I spend one-on-one time with the family, like introduce them to our team, so that they can feel connected, and they're not just like, I'm dropping my kid off for the very first time, and they're gonna hop on a bus, and so.
But this program, as we'll get into, is not just that 1 week in the summer. It's a year-round thing, and it's a Pathways program. So explain the relationship between the Pathways and then the camp, the 1 week camp. What is that?
1 week camp is an incredible experience, and it's overnight. It's 5 days. The kids come in. They're normally nervous, and then they like open up. And by the end of the week, they're like so fearless and outgoing, and their hope is really high. And then they go home and they go back to school. And what we were finding was after they would go home and back to school, their hope would decrease. And so Pathways exists so that we can have consistent touch points with our kids, and keep their hope at high levels. And we do that through a wide variety of events, and then we have an awesome team of volunteers and mentors and coaches who show up and support the kids in a different capacity than camp, but still the same level of eagerness and joy and hope.
So how many times during the year before the camp season starts do you have projects and programs for the Pathways?
We have programs for High Adventures, which is ages 12 through 17, once a month. And then we have programs for our Classic, which is 7 through 11, once a month. And then we have some family programs just randomly throughout the year. It's not as consistent as once a month, but we do quite a few programs throughout the whole year leading up to camp.
And how many kids in total are participating, not just in the camp, but in the whole Pathways year-round program?
Yeah, that number fluctuates big time. I would say, like on our roster, there's probably like 75 kids, and then we normally see about 50 of them most regularly. And then for our family events, we open it up to not just the 7 to 17-year-olds. Like there may be a 3-year-old sibling that joins us, and so we have a really big community for camp.
That's great. All right, so let's talk about what goes on at the camp. How, Megan, you start talking about that. How is the day structured? Obviously, you did it this year after the regular camp life ended at you were at a place in Rhode Island, right? A camp. And there was like a regular summer camp, and then there was a week for you in August, after the regular kids went home. So how does the day get structured so these kids are not going there and say, oh, wait a minute, I have to go, I'm being psychologically evaluated, I have to take an ACE test today and a HOPE test tomorrow? I mean, how is it structured so they're really just at camp, but yet the messages you need to send them are getting through? How does that work?
Yeah, so at camp, they're not doing a lot of forms or surveys and things like that. We do most of that beforehand, so that once they get there, they can just kind of take the time to be kids and be campers. And our counselors are really awesome about checking in with kids and surveying and kind of evaluating their campers' progress throughout the days and throughout the week. So it really kind of does come down to counselors having those kind of conversations with campers, so that it's not too formal or boring as sitting down and doing forms every day. But yeah, it's a pretty typical camp day. They wake up, we do some mindfulness in the morning. We'll do breakfast, and then kind of a whole camp check-in, maybe some games on the field. And then we'll kind of move into some stations, whatever the activities are for the day, whether it's kayaking or swimming or rock climbing or zip lining or whatever it is. And then we usually go into lunch, and then we'll have kind of some chill out time, kick back and relax time after lunch, where they can kind of hang out with their cabin groups and get to know each other. And then the afternoon, there's more activities, so they'll do the other kind of stations that they didn't get to in the morning. And then at night, we do dinner, and then we do campfires. So we'll kind of get around. We'll either break off into our classic and high adventures, or on the first and last day, we do a whole camp-wide campfire, which is really awesome. And you kind of get to check in with kids at that point too, and hear from them. What did you guys kind of see today? How did you feel about today? We want to hear from them. Where did you see hope today? And so we really, every day are mentioning and talking about hope and the importance of looking out for it in ourselves and in our peers. And also encouraging them to coach each other up on that. And so beyond just their relationships with their counselors, by having just pretty casual conversations about hope and about supporting each other, it's really awesome to see them start to do that for each other too. And unprompted by adults, they're talking to each other about, wow, that was so hopeful of you. You were so persistent. And so it really is cool to see that it doesn't take a lot of like formal sit down conversations about the science of hope to get these kids to really buy into wanting to go for it.
So my question, Mariah, is based on what Megan is saying, do you keep like a file on each kid where you kind of measure their progress during that week, and then when the week is over, you sit down and confer and try to talk about what each kid got out? And in other words, wouldn't you want to know that kid A started out here and really went all the way up to Z, or kid A never left A and needs more work? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah. And so we use a hope scale, and so kids are taking a survey which measures their hope.
How often do they do that?
They do it during camp. They do it 3 times. So before camp, during camp, and then 30 days after camp, just to engage where they are at with hope. But also, like, the structure of camp so much is like a lot of encouragement and building up, and so we don't wait until the end to give some positive or constructive feedback. It's like in the moment. It's like, hey, kid A, I see that you just like conquered one of your fears. I'm your biggest cheerleader, so I'm going to cheer you on. Or we have conversations where it's like, hey, kid A, like, I noticed that you just talked to somebody in a way that hurt their feelings. What does it look like to be a good friend and a supportive person who actually adds to our culture of safety? And so we do both in the moment, and we see them grow. And when we see them grow, we just name it in the moment so that they know that they're growing too, and that we see them and that they're loved by us, and there's a lot of safety in succeeding, but there's also a lot of safety in messing up, and also just they have the support to do both. And
so what have you noticed from this year? You had the camp in August, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
How many kids were there?
We took 45 to camp.
How many, and then with each age group did you have about?
Ooh, I would have to look at the numbers. But like 15 high adventures, and then the rest class.
And the high adventures is
up our
11
teens,
to 17?
Our 12 to 17.
Oh, 12 to 17. And the others are 7 to 11?
Yeah.
And how many, in terms of the setting, how many kids in a bunk?
Yeah, so we have 6 kids in each cabin. Mm-hmm.
And how many counselors in each cabin?
We have 2 counselors in each cabin. We have pretty low ratios for Camp Hope. It's 1 to 3. And so whether we're in the cabin or at the lunch table,
it's always
1 to 3. Mm-hmm.
And how are these counselors trained for this work? Obviously, they're not mature adults. Some of them are college students. What's the age age level for
Yeah,
the
we have,
counselors?
our counselors' age level is 18 to 24 for counselors, and then we have a bunch of other volunteers who come into camp. And so while they are younger, they are super relatable to our teens and our younger kids, but they're also really passionate, and they're the ones for the job. And so yes, they're 18 to 24, but their age doesn't hinder them at all. We're really excited to get to partner with them.
What kind of tutorial or programs do you give them to prepare them for this work?
Yeah, we do a summer-long training, and so there's regular training almost bi-weekly, and we look at what is hope. We look at trauma and how it affects an individual. We look at ways to communicate, how to cheer people on. We look at, this year we had an autism-informed care training because so many of our campers are on the spectrum. We play a ton of games and do group management, and so we did about 8 trainings maybe, and we just took time to go through the curriculum and set everyone up for success going into camp, because our counselors make camp happen, and so yeah, we take our time with our counselors.
All right, and do the counselors participate in the evaluation process after camp is over? How does that work?
Yeah, so counselors do participate in evaluations, and they do evaluations during camp. And then post-camp, they're able to nominate like a camper of the year. And they give some feedback for how camp went, but also like really highlighting big moments for different campers.
All right. So you worked at the camp this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And this Mariah, was this the second year that you were at the camp?
Yeah.
Yeah. And last year was at the same camp in Rhode Island or a different camp?
Yeah, we have one partner camp that we've been using for the past 2 years that we just adore, and there's a lot of flexibility to really bring our Camp Hope to them and really create our schedule how we would like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Megan, I'd like you to talk, if you can, to talk about the trajectory of a kid that started with a low hope score, and after the camp experiences, the score went up. Tell us about how that works and any examples you can, without mentioning names, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common story, I think, to see kids kind of come in at the beginning of the week with lower hope, and by the end of the week they're flourishing and very hopeful. I mean, I think especially with homesickness, you have a lot of kids who have never been away from home before, especially for overnights like that. And so there's a lot of nervousness around being away from their family, being away from their house, being away from maybe a pet, whatever it may be. And so encouraging them to create those connections in the new space is really awesome. And that's a way that you see them really build confidence while they're bonding with the kids in their cabins and they're making friends with the kids at their activity groups. I mean, I know the rock wall was a huge part of a lot of kids building that confidence and building kind of connections in the way that, I mean, you have kids that didn't even want to put a harness on. They didn't want to even look at the helmets. They wanted nothing to do with it. And by the end of the hour session there, they were up on the wall because they had kids in their group cheering for them and encouraging them, and also just comforting them when they were nervous, and giving them the space to be nervous. It's really incredible seeing how these kids interact with each other and encourage each other, and support each other without even us having to do anything. They see a kid in their group at the wall who's scared, and they go over and they say, hey, I see you're scared. What can I do? Do you want help? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to sit together? And being able to see a kid come in at the beginning of the week nervous and kind of in a shell, by the end of the week trying new things and making jokes with friends and laughing, is really awesome.
Yeah. So, Mariah, do you see kids, though, who come home on a high, the hope scores go up, but they come back and they go back down to earth and can't keep it up? What is that like? Have you seen that with kids, and what happens then?
Yeah, I have seen it, and it's quite normal because it's like camp, we're just going up, 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 and then camp ends, and then it's school, and it kind of goes down, because for a lot of the kids, like in a lot of, I think this is becoming a normal experience within schools, but bullying and weird relationship dynamics amongst peers. And so at camp, we foster such an intentional community for kids to feel a part of camp, to belong, to have healthy, safe relationships, and we are no tolerance for bullying whatsoever. And so everyone's accepted however they are, and they show up to camp, and they really just sink into that and get really comfortable, and then they go home to almost like reality, and they're like, oh, I miss camp. And because our events throughout the year is on a month-to-month basis, like we don't see the kids every day, and so now their closest friends aren't with them anymore, and they're in this environment, and they very much miss camp.
Yeah, I guess how do you plan the therapy so the hope score stays high all through the year?
Yeah, and so it's keeping kids involved and engaged. Like the kids definitely look forward to, like, oh, I know that next month we're going bowling, and I know my cabin mate is going to be there. Or they, like, if they can't text, then they'll just ask me. They'll be like, is so-and-so going to be there? And then I just do the communication amongst the group. And it's like, hey, all of you are going to be at bowling. Everyone's really excited to see each other. And then it keeps them really involved and engaged. And it keeps those relationships that are really important to the kids, still alive and active.
Yeah, and they still may be in homes that have issues, some of them.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can't erase those issues. And so we speak truthfully about issues, and we say that things are hard. And then when we are going on an outing like bowling, our goal is safety and fun. And that's what the kids need, because at the end of the day, we want to give the kids space to be a kid.
Right.
And that helps them keep their hope up too.
Yeah. Now I know that Safe Futures and Camp Hope has enlisted mentors to be available for kids during the projects, but couldn't the mentor program be used for a mentor to be in touch with a kid more regularly, perhaps just a phone call or a text or something, so that the kid keeps getting reminded of the hope and the fun of camp and the other activities? Is that something that you're doing?
We're always growing our program. And so we're always growing the program and growing the ways that we are more connected. And with technology, there's so many amazing ways to stay connected, whether it's a counselor to a camper, or a hope coach to a camper, or a participant, or the whole family. And so we are always growing and being more connected and making sure that the kids are feeling really supported. And then I've had mentors or counselors show up to school events to cheer on kids during their music recital or some big event, and so, or sports.
Are there enough mentors in the community? Could you use more to stay in touch with the kids?
We could always use more, only because our kids are really worth having a lot of safe adults.
So each kid doesn't have their own mentor at this point?
No, we do group mentorship, and we won't ever move to one-on-one mentorship. But I'm a firm believer that you can't cheer on a kid enough. And so why not give kids the opportunity to have 10, 15, 20 safe adults in their lives to show up for them.
Okay.
And so we can always use more.
So I guess my questions now are, what ways can the program, what did you learn, and you start, Megan, what ways can the program be even better, both the camp program and the Pathways program during the year? And is 5 days enough? Should it be 7 days? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're on the way, in that Pathways programs are always kind of expanding and growing. And so I think in doing that would be incredible. Our week at camp is so awesome, but as we've kind of been talking about, is when they get home, right, that hope kind of going back down, and really needing to reinforce those messages of hope and positivity and support. And so I would say just being able to kind of have more of those activities and meet-ins and check-ins is always awesome.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, and I agree, and that's actually a part of the plan is to increase our programming so that we are serving kids more regularly and keeping those hope scores high. And so as we grow the program, a lot of our plans have been to add more programming and even more family programming, because too, it's like we want to change the culture at home and give parents and caregivers the same language and tools that their kids are receiving, because oftentimes the parents didn't have the tools to begin with. And so we are expanding and growing in those ways, which I think we need to.
So some of these kids in private or group therapy outside of the Camp Hope experience or the pathways, are some of them involved in that?
Yeah, so a lot of our kids have very different, like various resources that they are utilizing and tapping in, and it really just depends on the kid and on the need and on the family's ability to like engage with different services. And so yeah, it's a wide variety, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to know, this is the point where I say, is there anything else your heart desire needs to say about the program that we haven't mentioned? Anything?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I would just say that it's such an awesome program, and I just love the space that it provides, not just for the kids, but like Mariah was saying, for the families too, and kind of opening the conversations to what do families look like, what do household dynamics look like, and what do you want them to look like, and just kind of acknowledging in general that, yeah, these kids, their destiny is not set in stone, but also like neither is their parents. And I would say that it's something that can be pretty widely shared, is that just this idea of hope and believing in yourself and believing in your dreams and believing in others is just a very powerful sentiment that I think goes underestimated too much.
And do you think that you both have the requisite training, or would you like to delve more into it and learn more to be able to use your intellect and learning to help these kids even more? What do you think about that? Do you feel like you're fully knowledgeable or need to get more education?
I don't think any of us have arrived. I think there's so many opportunities to further our
Does
education.
Casey Gwynn have like conferences and things like that?
There's
You can
conferences that
participate?
connect, because Camp Hope is everywhere, and so we really want to create a supportive network, not only for our Connecticut base, but or say Futures base, but for our Connecticut's camps, and then for our nationwide camps. And so we are always learning, because there's always things to learn. But even in like our region of Connecticut, like learning more about autism-informed care, learning more about how to engage like teens, just because like statistically disengaged youth are increasing, and so keeping our kids engaged. I think with new trends, there's always something to learn.
Yeah. All right, so as your final comment, Mariah, why don't you think that you're talking to a kid whose life at home is tough, who feels he has no hope, he doesn't feel that school is going to help him because he's not going to wind up being happy because things are such a mess, and he can't get it together. So what do you say to that kid to help him with your program?
Yeah. I would just meet the kid where they are. And so I would just let them know that we exist, that we want to support, that we can support in so many different ways. And then I would even ask, like, hey, are you open to me talking to your caregiver, your parent? And let's get you involved so that you can like be a part of something, so that they can feel hope, so that they can feel supported, because that kiddo is worth all the support and hope. And it can get really hard. It can be really hard to access different services or to be engaged in program. But my goal would be to make it as easy as possible. And so I would just meet that kiddo where they are, and find a way to stay in touch, and get them involved, because they're worth the hard work of figuring out how to make sure that they're connected.
So you're performing a wonderful service. It's a wonderful program, But I keep wondering, like the whole issue of domestic violence, how many kids are still in the shadows, and how do we get them out of those shadows to help them, right?
Yeah. And I think we kind of touched on it earlier too with the educational piece, like education. Like people don't know what they don't know, but the more we talk about it, the more opportunities people have to know. And so I think if our goal is to, which it is, to minimize domestic violence all the way, like we actually have to talk about it really openly and honestly, and be aware of what signs to look for. And we're all growing in that. And we're much further than we have been, but there's still a long way to go. And it's going to continue to be that way. But I think that as we provide services and support to youth, that we can actually make big strides in minimizing domestic violence, because, you know, our kids are going to change the culture.
Okay. All right. Well, it's wonderful to see you two so hopeful and to leading this terrific program that I'm very proud to be involved with. And so thank you for listening to Megan Foley and Mariah Murdoch talk about Camp Hope and the wonderful work that they're doing with the kids in our community. We'll see you all next time on Talk Back. Bye.